You are listening to the Freedom Podcast with Van Moody. Our desire is that you begin to live in freedom every day. Freedom in your mind, freedom in your finances, freedom from the external pressures of life. Prepare to be transformed as we seek to be free, mind, body, and soul. Let's get started.
Family, we want to welcome you to the Freedom Podcast. I am your host, Van Moody, and on this podcast, we cover a variety of topics that have any and everything to do with a life of purpose, freedom, and fulfillment. But once a month, we always tackle the important topic of financial freedom. And on the financial freedom version of our podcast, I'm always joined by my brother, the co-host with the most, Pastor George Thompson. Now, normally, by way of technology, George is in Los Angeles and I am in Birmingham. And you see, if you watch the podcast, then you see split screen. If you hear the audio, then you probably don't notice those nuances. But on this very special episode, I'm grateful that we are together here in Birmingham. George is with us. And I'm super excited, George, that we get a chance to jump into today's episode. So first of all, how are you doing, my brother?
I'm doing excellent. This is a dream come true. I always want us to be in person and be able to do this. And I'm just glad to be here. So I'm excited.
All right, we got some technical issues. Let's make sure that your mic is on. And if it's not on, let's get it on.
Testing.
There we go. Boom. Is your mic pack on? Let's try that. Make sure your pack is on. George, while you're doing that, I've gotten a question that, a number of people have asked me when, they say, well, what are you doing? I say, well, our church, we're doing a financial fast. And, the question that I've always gotten, what is that? And it's been interesting because I've had a variety of answers that I've shared with people about, obviously, what a fast is, but how the financial fast presents a nuance about us putting God first, not only in other areas, but particularly finances. But then the other day I was reading in Matthew 5, and I want to kind of open up with this because I was reading this in the Message translation, and it really grabbed my heart as kind of the why. And then I want to ask you to give us your why of a financial fast. But in Matthew 5 and verse 1, it says, when Jesus saw his ministry drawing crowds, huge crowds, he climbed a hillside, and those who were apprenticed to him, the committed, climbed with him. Arriving at a quiet place, he sat down and taught his climbing companions. And this is what he said: you're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there's more of God and his rule. You're blessed when you feel you've lost what's most dear to you. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. But then here's the verse that got me. You're blessed when you're content with just who you are. No more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought. You're blessed when you've worked up a good appetite for God. He's food and drink in the best meal you'll ever eat. I was reading that and it grabbed my heart, and the Lord said, that's why we do a financial fast. Because this notion of being blessed when we're content with who we are, no more, no less, and that moment that we find ourselves the proud owners of everything that can't be bought. For me, that was kind of my why, because we spend so much time in our society buying stuff. And a lot of times, the world will tell you that what you buy and what you consume and what you have, that it really in many ways defines who you are. And what I love about what we've done over the last 21 days in a financial fast is it's challenged people to really shut all of that down. And the word tells us then that's when we discover that we're the proud owners of everything that can't be bought. So that's kind of my why of a financial fast. You are a financial maven. You help people in so many ways to help them financially and, get it right with God. Let's start with that question for you. Like, why a financial fast? What do you think is significant about it?
It's great what you just said. But also why we do a fast is we find out how we're blessed by God. Is anybody here blessed? Blessed? You're just blessed.
Yeah.
God blesses you in actually stewardship in 4 areas. Can you hold up 4 fingers? The first thing he blesses you with is time. And the second thing that he blesses you with is a talent or a skill. So in Ephesians 2:10, we learn about that we're God's workmanship. There's nobody like you in the world. I'm a twin, and I have twin sons, and we all have different fingerprints. That's why we want to make sure we're doing things that God blesses with that. Third thing he blesses with is a temple, our bodies. We want to take care of that. And then fourth is treasure our finances. So first, we want to look at where we're at and how God has blessed us, and then utilize what God has blessed us with. And then also to move up a level. So, people are at different levels in life. So when you read the fast, people are 1 of 5 levels. Struggling and sinking means inability to pay your current bills. Steady means you have just enough to pay them. Solid means you've been doing something kind of for a while. Surplus, extra money, highest level service. So what you're doing is you're fasting, but to get to a new level, not for the world, but for God. You're showing how you're going to actually do that. And you walk through it. But that's why you fast, is that God has blessed you, and then you want to break through to get to the next level in God.
I love that. So now let's talk about practical tips. And I know that this may be kind of counterintuitive because some people who've been walking with us over these 21 days are like, woo, all right, excited. The fast is ending. Now I can go spend some money, right? But let's talk about not just why you do, but how you do a financial fast. Because coming out of this, there's some things that should have shifted. You talked about going to this next level, not for the world, but for God. And so, I know that I've got some personal kind of can-dos. Obviously one of the things that my family and I did is we cut out unnecessary spending, whether it was through Amazon. It's funny, I was leaving to come here this morning, and my wife and I were talking, I'm like, babe, you need new tires on our car. And I thought that she had ordered them a while ago, and she was like, nope, I didn't order them because we're on the financial fast, right? So cutting out unnecessary spending is kind of one of the things that we did, and really just used that time that we would have been shopping online or spending or even eating out. We use that time.
We're gonna talk about that.
Yeah, in a different way, and dedicated more of that time and those resources that would have gone elsewhere to really leaning into God. But I love some of your how-tos. Why don't you unpack kind of how you've been walking through your financial fast?
All right, so when I'm walking through the fast, but also this is everybody, is that one of the things that we say, cut unnecessary spending. There's something called a need. That's what you need. Then there's something called a want. Then there's something called a wish. Okay, so what we're doing is we're buying just what we need. So actually tires will fall in that category.
Yeah,
you
I
do
thought
need
about
tires,
that.
right, they'll fall in that category. But then it's the going out to eat, because what happens a lot of times is we don't know how much we spend going out to eat. Then you get what's called a prosperity jar. I'm going to repeat that again. Prosperity jar. Can you do me a favor? Just say prosperity jar.
Prosperity jar.
And if you're driving in a car later on, just say prosperity jar. Always play along with us, okay? So when you have a jar, but right now I have a prosperity pouch with me that I'm carrying with me. And what I'm doing is I'm getting a margin. So I flew here yesterday, and they have this restaurant in Charlotte's airport. It's called Bojangles, and they got really good biscuits, chicken, things like this. And you know what I did? I didn't get anything there. I prepped my food before I even got here, and then I just didn't even go there, because I can't just go there and get one biscuit or some of it or less. I'm going to order the whole. I'll walk in there and order everything on that menu except for thank you, please come again. So then I flew here, and then at the hotel they drove me to, and I had a choice of going to Target, Walmart, or Costco. Do you guys see how I'm naming very specific names? And then out here you guys have Publix, a grocery store. So I went to a grocery store and I bought food. And that's what I did instead of eating out. So, and then there were all the restaurants around. So I would take the difference between, let's say I spent $21. If I would have spent if I would have bought meals, 2 meals, that probably would have been about $40, right? So I'll take the difference and put it where? In my prosperity pouch. Then we're going to talk about where we're going to invest it later. But you guys see where I'm getting the margins? There's no eating out. There's no vending machines. You guys know people worship vending machines, right? You know, you guys know that, right? You put in the money and then you bow down, right? So we don't do that. We don't do that during the fast, right? We focused. All right? So that's how we walk through and we begin to do that. And then you learn how to prepare meals at home in the same way. But then the difference, the money that you get in that prosperity jars, prosperity pouch or bag, you begin to do that, and then it turns into a prosperity account where it is put somewhere for something, which we'll cover later. That's say vested.
No, I love that because, you know, I've had conversations with a number of people because fasting is a spiritual discipline that I've practiced for many years. Our church has practiced consistently. We do it at least 2 times a year. And I've had people to ask questions about, well, how long do you fast, right? And throughout Scripture, there are, you know, several instances. There are people that have done 1 day or 3 days or 7 days or 21 days or 40 days, right? But I think there's something very special about a 21-day fast. Now, I'm not trying to say it's more deep or more spiritual than any other, but there is science around the fact that 21 days actually leads to new habits. That generally it takes about 21 days for a new habit to be formed. And so when we talk about a financial fast in particular, we also understand the spiritual implications of it. We know that God is our source. We know that the Bible is very clear that everything comes from the Lord and that we don't own anything. We are stewards. We're just called to manage it. And so rightly ordering even your spending. I often tell people that every financial decision is a spiritual God decision, right? And so part of what we're doing in this time of financial fasting is reordering, you know, our financial priorities so that God is first. But doing it over 21 days is really important because what should happen, hopefully, is that new habits have been set in motion. That over these 21 days, when, you know, we haven't eaten out as much, when, you know, we haven't gone to Bojangles and gotten the biscuits, right? We realize, you know, I didn't really need that. One of the things that I do is I meal prep. And, you know, I tell people all the time, people are like, well, how do you do, you know, the vegan lifestyle? I'm like, you have to meal prep, right? You absolutely have to meal prep. But what's interesting about what I found doing meal prep is I actually save a ton of money. I save, you know, the ability to meal prep for a week, you know, is maybe $120, right? Well, our grocery bill went down, our eating out bill went down because I am spending less money, but I'm actually eating better. And so then over the 21-day period, I've been doing it much longer than 21 days, but what that's done is it's created a habit. And so what are some habits? What are some things that should be normalized, right? We've been doing this for 21 days. What are some habits or things that should be normalized coming out of the fast?
Right. That's a great question. And if you look at this, how we're going to do this is that when you do meal prep and all these things, you actually start feeling better. That's called being a good steward. Earlier said that everything belongs to God. The Bible says in Psalms 24:1, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness therein. That means everything belongs to God. So what we're doing is we're being good stewards over what God has blessed us with. Remember we just talked about time, temple, talent, treasure. So then what I'm calling is when we do these 21-day challenges or when we do these 21-day fasts, you're actually getting to double up, right? You're saving time by meal prepping. I'm going to go into that in a moment. You're also taking care of a talent or a skill because you're developing things. By the way, guys, my cooking skills have totally changed. You guys know there's something called food handlers. You guys know that just handle food, and then there's people that are cooks. Since the air fryer kind of came on, I've made a comeback now. So what happens is that I can prep the food, right? And then temple is number 3, your body. You can eat healthier. You guys know that when you go to a restaurant, you can't control anything with the food.
Yeah.
Right? You can't control how much butter, the calories, the sugar, the content. They want it to taste good. They do calorie and content, and I don't want to get into macronutrients of the proteins and the fats and the carbs, but you know that's totally on a different scale. And then fourth is money. So when you meal prep, that's the 4 areas. Number 1 is that during this fast, for this 21 days, you weren't driving. Look at how much time you spent driving to restaurants. There are people that actually walk on this earth that eat out every day. Do you know how much money that is and how much time you spend driving to different places and trying to figure out where you're going to eat and what you're going to do? You can spend that time in prayer.
Yeah.
You can spend that time in Bible study. Your app is literally awesome. You could go on your app and then prepare your meal and then watch something from TWC during that time. And then you're taking care of your time, your talent, your skill, your sharpening, and then also your body and then your finances. Back to what you said, the $120. So we're going to take that, just real quick numbers. I count numbers, God makes numbers count. So we said $120. If you're extrapolating out over a meal, that's like $7 a meal or $6 a meal.
Yep.
So you understand? Like, so that's different. Then you guys go to these restaurants and then they're around 15. And then I live in LA, so like, you know, these numbers are even higher. That and tipping, and then also there are people that order drinks when they go places. You know what I mean? Like drink sodas, things like that. And then you guys will find out, my kids, I don't do that. Do you guys know sodas and things like that? My kids, I don't do that. We went to, they get all their spelling words right. We used to go to this restaurant called Panda. You know, you guys have pandas out here?
Panda Express.
Panda Express?
Yeah.
And then my kids went there one time, I'll never forget it, like it was yesterday. At the end, they had all that ice chest with all those drinks on there. And my daughter was 7 years old, looked me directly in the face and said, "Daddy, can we get a drink?" And I was with the twin boys, all 3 of them are standing there, crowded, people are there. I just stepped back in my best Fred Sanford. I said, "Hey man, we came here to eat, not to drink." I didn't do the Elizabeth, I'm coming to join you, honey. Okay, but hold on, let me drop down into George Financial, Pastor George, Stewardship Pastor. If I would have bought them drinks, 2 times 5 people would have been $10. $10 times 5 days a week, that's $50. $50 times 4 weeks in a month, what's 50 times 4? 50. We're already at $100. We're already at $200, right?
Yep.
200 times 10.
$2,000.
$2,000.
Yep.
Then the other 2 months, $2,400. That $2,400 we're spending on drinks, we could have done something else with it. I got to say it now. We got to invest. You guys understand? We should be investing this money after we give. We give and then we invest. And you should be investing in yourself. There's businesses you can invest in. There's companies you can invest in. We can talk about that. But we have to do what's something called spending control. Like, we just don't waste money.
Okay, so I was going to get into something else, but since you just opened that bag, I do think that's really important. You know, one of the things that I read, gosh, man, it was probably 25 years ago, that it maybe was longer than that. I think I was just out of high school or college. And I read an article in Forbes magazine, and it really shifted my thinking. This article showed how there was a school teacher who barely made more than $25,000, $27,000 a year, I think was her annual salary. And the whole article was about how it is not what you make that will determine whether or not you create wealth, but it's what you do with what you make. And this article showed how this school teacher lived within her means and created savings that she invested consistently, and how she became a millionaire, you know, over a period of time. Not when she retired. This was before her retirement. And I thought about that because back then, I think, you know, when I was a kid, I used to think, oh, you know, the goal was to go to college and get a job and make X amount of dollars, because I'm thinking that's the pathway to changing a generation. But that article really challenged me to really think about what you just have laid out. It's creating that financial margin, and then what we do with that margin. Now, let me put a spin on it, and then I want us to lean into that, because I really think that this is an even bigger issue for communities of color. I have been really just in a unique season where the Lord has been leading me to read more history. I was telling the church several weeks ago about how I read the new biography of King by Jonathan Ive called King of Life, and how I was moved and really challenged to find out that all the way back in the 1960s, Dr. King was talking about the need for reparations. Really in the final kind of quarter of his life, you know, his whole platform, this is after the Voting Rights Act was passed and the Civil Rights Act was passed, the whole platform of his life was about economic inequities that disproportionately affected people of color. And so for me to read about that and to read how back in the 1960s, this was his final push. You know, many of us forget that when he was assassinated in Memphis, he was there on behalf of striking sanitation workers. You know, it's interesting now that the auto workers are striking. You know, news just was released, and it may be old by the time this podcast episode comes out, that even President Biden is now talking about going and joining the picket lines, right? But that's an economic issue. Whether it's the auto workers, UPS just averted a major strike, you know, because, you know, they were saying that their employees needed more money. The issue, though, is how are we, as people of color and people in general, how are we advocates for the financial future that we need and that our children and our children's children need? And the only way for us to do that is to stop waiting on somebody to do it for us, because that ain't never gonna happen. You know, and I know that's not good English, but that's true theology. That ain't never gonna happen. But we can do it for ourselves. And this is why this conversation is so important. And not only do we need to do it for ourselves, but scripturally, this is the will of God for us. The Bible talks time and time again about not only God's will for his people to have enough and to have more than enough to leave a legacy and an inheritance to their children's children, but the need for us as good stewards to make decisions that honor him in making sure that we're saving. In your book, you talk about being a save-vester, right? That creating that margin of saving, as you just kind of walked us through that analogy, is the way that we begin to create that wealth. And so for me, there's so much purpose around it, and we've got to do more of it. You agree?
Right. Yes. But also, you said you read an article. First, want to talk to you about what you said in the school teacher. This was actually in Black Enterprise. I had a client, you know, usually we can't give out these for confidentiality, but it was in Black Enterprise. She worked in a cafeteria, she wasn't a school teacher, worked in a cafeteria. And what she would do is she would just save change. Started just saving change, like when people were doing things, and sometimes people would either take their change or she would just save change. And then what happened was she got into prosperity jars and she started saving them. Then she would start looking at companies and stocks and start investing in them. And those would grow and they grow and they grow and they grow. And that's a live example of someone that just took change that they had just saved and on their own and just started investing it. And then she was actually in Black Enterprise, one of the investors, just showing how it had grown. And then that was just in the cafeteria. That's number one. Also, what you said, though, about us just doing this and no one else is going to do this, is that this is actually our opportunity to do that. You always look at when someone's saying whatever level they're at financially, they always say, hey, how do I get to the next level? They're waiting on someone else to do something, but they're just practical things that you could do to get to the level yourself.
Yep.
So like a prime example when I said save vesting is, do you know all the things that you buy if you were just to take, what are 10 things that are just really good products or different things that you buy?
Yep.
You just turn around and own the stock of those companies. Just think about that for a minute. Everybody right now, I guess we're finding out that Amazon is driving around to people's houses just doing wellness checks on you because they haven't seen you order anything in the last 21 days. But shouldn't you just think about maybe, and just so you're clear on me, I never said don't wear Nike tennis shoes. I've never said don't shop on Amazon. What I'm saying is buy the stock of the company.
That's good.
You know, like my wife, she used to work for Starbucks, and I used to sit there and watch that. Do you guys know, like, and then now people are not drinking Starbucks for 21 days. I'm just showing you, hey, make it at home, but just buy it not as much. Do you guys understand the business model? They're selling hot and cold water for $4. That's a good business model. Amazon is literally, you guys know Sears, anybody old up Sears Roebuck?
Yeah,
Sears,
I remember
Roebuck?
Sears.
Remember that when you used to go pick out your Christmas present, they'd say, I'm on page 46J.
Yeah,
you
buddy.
circle it. Do you guys know Amazon shouldn't exist?
Yep.
That should be Sears. They just didn't go. Do you guys know that FedEx and UPS shouldn't exist? The post office decided they were just going to just do mail. Now, you look at that, those words are now words. FedEx it. No one else has ever said to me, they'll hold a UPS envelope in your hand and say, FedEx this. They've coined the phrase overnight, just like Q-tip. What company is that?
Johnson & Johnson.
Right, then you have Kleenex. That's a brand. These brands that you shop and that you buy and that we put our money into, you should own them. That's how you close the gap, is by ownership. If I had a challenge like we did in the past with Disney, I don't go out there and pick it. I call investor relations and I want to go and sit in the boardroom.
Yeah.
The air conditioner works much better in there than it does outside. But that's how you close the gap, is through ownership and share ownership. And that's how you partner with them.
Man, George, we always get into a situation on our podcast where we got more content than we have time. So let me ask you this. For individuals that may be watching or listening to this podcast that say, you know what, I want to do a 21-day fast, or for individuals that have been on this 21-day fast, financial fast with us, what's your final word to them as they are maybe ending a financial fast, or maybe they've been listening to this podcast and say, you know what, I want to do that. I want to get my prosperity jar. I want to create more margin. I want to examine how I'm spending and reorder my finances. What encouragement would you give to them as we close this podcast episode?
First, I want to say thank you to you, Pastor Van, for also putting this out here and also us doing it and plugging this. On September 1st, this book hit #1 on Amazon in the money section and #8 in finance. And the reason why I want to say thank you to Pastor Van is that this is a Christian book with scriptures. Those other ones aren't, and that's the first thing that we do is we get in our relationship to God. But if you want to do the 21-day challenge, the absolute easiest way to do is I have something called 21-day challenge. You go to georgebthompson.com. I'll put the link in the chat, georgebthompson.com, and then there's actually, we go through 21 days together where I send you a video every day where I'm on there showing you, hey, what level you're at. I'm encouraging you every day of a different item to do for 21 days to get to the next level. So I walk you through that, or you can always get the book on Amazon, or just, and then lastly, keep tuning into our show. I think that when we're doing this Freedom podcast, what we're doing is you're riding with us. We're sitting in the car, Pastor Van's driving, I'm sitting in the passenger seat, you're in the back seat, and we're just showing you, and we're driving you to the goal of what God has for you, to be a good steward over your time, temple, talent, and treasure. And you have an unfair advantage because we're showing you all the things that God has put into your life to do it.
Incredible, incredible. Well, friends, thanks again for joining us on this incredible episode of the Freedom Podcast with my co-hostess with the mostest, my co-host with the most, Pastor George Thompson, all the way from LA, but we're excited that we were able to sit together and to dig deeper. Looking forward to our next episode, brother.
Right, and we're gonna check out, and then also government merch. Look, do good, get out of debt.
Good stuff. Thanks, family.
hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Freedom Podcast. For a broader range of topics, go to Van Moody's YouTube page or visit twccc.org.